the tipping point stuff in 2001 with the Al-Qaeda guys and had the little cloud over Las Vegas on my map. At any rate, I think we should probably move on to the next question.
Okay. Thanks, George. George, again, for listeners, George's site is urbansurvival.com. We're going into the precious metals now. George, one of the areas of differences between yourself and Cliff is the market behavior. With the silver and gold exchange prices rising this week, I think it hit $35 this week, and with the US stock market also rising, do you still expect a massive Dow correction back to its 6,700 lows, or, as Cliff thinks, will the market melt up so it goes to its all-time high of 14,000, as it is propped up by the Fed while hyperinflation increases the prices of precious metals, food, and energy? In short, based on your economic experience, a melt up or melt down?
Well, the two views, Jules, are not mutually exclusive. From a pure chart standpoint, we could easily go back down to 66.27 Dow on a weekly closing basis. On the other hand, as I mentioned, I believe that when deflation becomes widely recognized, if in fact we get there, then I think the Fed will have no choice but to implement a currency revaluation on probably a 10-to-1 basis. On a 10-to-1 basis, if you had $10,000 of cash, you would now have $100,000. But what would happen to existing contracts that did not have any provision in them for revaluation of the currency? Things could get so ugly so fast, and yet it would be a convenient way to give people a lot of money fast and get it out into circulation. Give you an example. Say Ground Rod bought a house. Ground Rod bought a house for $200,000, maybe at the peak of the bubble, 2008. Had moved Ground Rod. The house is now worth $100,000, and Ground Rod is making $50,000 a year. With a revaluation, and they'll by the way, they'll use the word revaluation, not devaluation, and they'll do that to sell it, just like they use consumer debt. Is a bad thing, so they call it consumer credit because they're looking at it from their standpoint all the time. Anyway, and they're issuing us credits to borrow money from them. Anyway, so here's Ground Rod. He's got $50,000 a year of income, and he's got $100,000 debt on this house. With a revaluation, if the underlying contractual value is not adjusted, he'll still have $100,000 in value, but he'll have an annual income of not $50,000, but $500,000 going forward. So first thing you know, Ground Rod really is going to end up owning his house. So in some ways, a revaluation could work out in favor of certain classes of people. Now, where it isn't going to help anybody would be a revaluation without rent control, because a landlord would quickly realize that the tenant that was making $3,000 a month now makes $30,000 a month. And so any revaluation scheme would have to be accompanied by either wage and price controls or certainly rent controls in order to keep people from overnight being priced out of housing. It's still something to think about. Same thing is true with gold and silver. Gold in a 10-to-1 right now would be at $14,000 per ounce, well within Cliff's linguistic outline for what's ahead. And silver would be at $350, but because there may not be enough physical silver in the vaults to cover worldwide demand, if too many people start taking delivery, and there are moves afoot to do that, we could easily see $150 silver, and $150 silver times 10 in a revaluation becomes $1,500 silver. Of course, at the same time, gasoline would go from $6 a gallon to $60 a gallon, but oh well, that's just how things would work out. Long answer, but we could easily hit both of those expectation sets. And we might not hit mine, we might not hit his, but he's just reporting what's in there in the language.
Thanks, George. Kat, you got a question for George?
Yes. Hello, George.
Yes, ma'am.
I have been every morning sitting there with Urban Survival with my cup of Java. Thank you so much, and I'm also Peoplenomics subscriber. I've got a question from Party Pup.
Okay.
Watching the pattern of metals action closely over the past year, it appears that while silver has decoupled from gold, and while it has outperformed gold in the last 6 months, it is clearly still a ways from its 1980 non-inflation adjusted high of $49.95 an ounce, while gold has nearly doubled its 1980 non-inflation adjusted high of $850 an ounce. Although Cliff has been predicting $5 days in silver, many wonder whether silver's ascent is being held back by gold, the more political and monetarily significant metal, which must rise along with silver. So, in your opinion, A, how high will we see silver get before we hit the $2,000 gold tipping point? And B, since silver is still an industrial metal, is there a price at which you believe it makes sense to unload silver and redirect assets into gold, which has historically been much less volatile? Or will silver be a reliable form of wealth protection as long as wealth matters? It's a long one.
Yeah, I don't know if my brain can handle all of it. The short answer is I believe that the powers that be probably have a much lower pain threshold on gold than $2,000 per ounce. I believe that there may be enough derivatives tied to gold in different currency transactions, particularly in the international arena, that I would not be surprised if the powers that be don't have a threshold much lower at, say, the $1,700 level. Don't get me wrong. I mean, that's still a nice little pop from where we are today, but I'd be surprised to see gold much over 1,600 by the end of the year. Not saying that we would necessarily not go to 2,000 in a short term, but my expectation would be that we'll maybe go up through this April secondary bounce thing after we go down and test the 11,750. But I would expect that we'd then see gold come down to around 1,000. And it's possible. Now this is just an outlier possibility. But remember, in Cliff's work, it's very hard to pull directional calls. So silver could have a $5 day, but it could be a $5 downside day. So while I'm optimistic about silver and gold as long-term values, I think that there are some major contractual issues related to what the price of gold has to be at the end of the year when a lot of these contracts reset either on December 31 or January 1, based on interest rates and commodity prices on that date. I think that there would be a lot of problems in the financial system with resets come year end if the commodities are more than, say, 1,800 gold and $50 silver. That's just an expectation. Not saying that they're bad things to buy. If I could find more silver, I'd probably buy some more. But there are also a number of issues related to fraud. I'm sure you've read about the tungsten bars that are covered with gold that supposedly were unloaded from the U.S. to a lot of other countries during the closing days of the Clintonista administration, and that supposedly was carried out through the Bush administration, so that some of our major counterparties may be losing confidence in what they really have, and that might explain why they can still buy our bonds. But whether those bonds include verbiage about revaluation remains unclear. It sounds like a weaselly answer, but I think that $2,000 gold is something that might well happen for either a short term, but I'd be surprised if it lasted long enough to cash in come the end of the year, if that was a particular investment horizon. I think that what would really fit would be something like the United States experiencing a domestic terrorism event in response to a declined market, a well-orchestrated rally around the country kind of rally, which would be coupled with this is the financial Pearl Harbor kind of talk, followed by the government trying to buy up gold and silver at some nominal figure, say $1,500 for gold and maybe $40 silver, and declaring it a felony not to do so. Most people forget, everybody remembers that gold was called in the Depression of the 1930s, but a lot of people forget that silver was also called in 34. Granted, nobody went to jail that I know of, but there's also been speculation on the internet that one reason not to own American gold or silver product is that the government could make a case, however flimsy, that those coins are really the property of the U.S. Mint. Just like it's illegal to deface the dollar bill in your wallet, not because it's not a piece of paper that a pen won't work on, but because it's property of the U.S. government. And so a lot of us who invested way early in these commodities made a conscientious decision, conscientious too, to buy only commodity units which were not property of the U.S. government for our long-term hedging position.
Yes, I am. Thank you very much for answering the first question, George. That was awesome. The question that I have, I've heard rumors there's a plan to crash major currencies so the World Bank could offer their SDRs as a solution. If this was to happen, how would we see this scenario being played out? Would it be in stages? And how long would this process last? Could an end scenario be a two-tier currency system for all countries?
I don't think a two-tier currency system would work very well for the pure, simple fact